Sinai I, the Tablets of Sinai. Though the ancient elves extended their rule to the plains and to outer space, they never really unified the planet they were from. Adeshni warlords of Mora roamed independent, and the Nephilim of Atlantis were given utmost autonomy. As always, the Rosastan was in constant revolt. Bharat was the plaything of the old Aryan gods, which later split into Hinduism and Zoroastrianism. Footnote on Zoroastrianism, also called Badin. End footnote. Some non-elven races were allowed to make confederations of tribes, and some non-blood elves were allowed to run their own kingdoms. Not even every blood elf culture was part of the ancient elven system, and even amongst the ancient elves there was much rivalry and no political unity. No one empire controlled everything, and they sometimes contented themselves with protectorates and buffer states, as well as subterfuge and espionage in another elf's domain. Other times, they would find arbitrators to settle their squabbles. One such arbitrator was a powerful witch of Atlantis, of whom's magical prowess no other Nephilim could hope to rival. This witch, who had 13 heads, is also worth noting for the fact that our archaeologists and spirit seers identify him as the first known source of the primordial spirit heresy. Basically, this heresy asserts that the gods did not create the spirit world, but rather the spirit world was the foundation upon which the Fortusian Everchange and heaven grew out of, and then, only later, did it reveal itself to the gods. This heresy is closely related to, but distinct from, the so-called truth of lie. Now, no one can say he was the first person to tell this blasphemy, but he was its most famous early proponent. It irked the gods and other members of his race, the Nephilim, and surely they would have killed him had it not been for two things. First, this witch could not be beat in a magical duel, and hand-to-hand, or even ranged, combat against him was futile, as his senses were imbued with the Arcanum. Second, the ancient elves loved him, and his death would result in great reprisals against the Nephilim of Atlantis. So, when a conflict broke out in the air, it was decided that the two great powers of the south needed a buffer betwixt them. The elves looked to none other than this witch, for he was well respected enough that neither side would interfere with his autonomy, personally powerful enough to withstand assassination, and, as a Nephilim, his throne was stable. They crowned this witch with the name Tian Huang, and he called his kingdom Sinai. This was the year 3984 of the fourth lyre of the second dusk. Tian Huang reigned for 18,000 years. During his reign, he created a ritual still instrumental to the survival of the Sinai state. Recall that the soul resides in the spirit world, and it is only through either fey or shadow magic that it can be tethered to a body, though that body need not always be organic. Then, upon death, only powerful magics can prevent the soul's ties to the body from being severed and walking the porcelain roads. The spirits are able to imbue themselves into a particular place, a particular object, a particular inert thing. The nymphs are spirits that have migrated into the materium. A dryad may become one with a tree or the entire forest, a nereid with a body of salt water, naiads with fresh water, oreads with mountains, lampods with the underworld. There are also the photonods, or the more specialized heliads, who become connected to a source of light. If a spirit of Pilar, that is, a spirit allied to Pilar, becomes a nymph, they become a nymph of this type. The heliads are those solar nymphs that occupy suns and slay vampires. In this way, the nymph retains its individuality, yet it is also connected to these physical regions. The nymph is still a spirit, and damage done to the thing they are connected to hurts them, but they also exist and connect physically, though this does mean that they have given up all of the powers the spirit world gives them. It is thought that the most powerful of nymphs can actually come to occupy an idea, such as Egeria, a nymph of Anas, that is, a worshipper of Anas, though some believe she is actually the daughter of Anas, or at least his Holy Spirit. A spirit may also only semi-migrate and occupy some piece of fire or totem as a fetish. When this happens, the spirit has some degree of control over the magics of life and death, but this connection does not require fey or shadow magic to occur. All manners of extraplanar creatures could come into the spirit world and occupy a mortal's body in lieu of their soul, which requires at least residual fey and shadow magics to connect to the body's chakras. However, the gods, and the gods alone, could enter into the spirit world and act as a spirit. They may act as a Holy Spirit, an active entity, which is also the nexus related spirits coalesce about. They may be even simpler. A person of the Godhead may take on a hill, or they may be called into a fetish for ritual purposes. Sometimes this is temporary, other times this is permanent. Tian Huang saw that the gods could therefore act as both a spirit and as a soul. The gods are not spirits, but they could send one of their persons to the spirit world to act as a spirit, their Holy Spirit. The gods are not souls, but they could send one of their persons to act as a soul, their avatar. Tian Huang knew that each particular person of the Godhead is one in being. So, he took an inductive leap and realized that anything that could act as a soul could act as a spirit, and vice versa. Footnote. Perhaps there were other ways to deduce this, but this was his thought process. End footnote. Tian Huang studied this problem. He first studied ghosts, as ghosts are untethered souls in the spirit world, but he did not want to create a nation of ghosts, and he certainly didn't want their power mediated by shadow energy. Instead of interacting with the world the way a ghost does, he wanted the control that divine intervention bestows. He realized that the gods had achieved such tethering through arcane rituals, probably something taught to them by Virgo. Tian Huang thus redirected the souls of the dead of Sinai. Special magicians would construct a soul tablet for each person, replete with draconic runes, and bind a person to them. Each soul tablet is necessarily unique, and after death, the soul comes to this tablet and occupies it the same way a spirit would occupy a fetish. They are kept in a shrine, and every tablet in the same shrine can commune with one another. Each shrine is thus the conglomeration of all the dead. While there are general rules of rites and rituals, each shrine has its own version of this ideal. These shrines regulate the souls, and allow the state to harness them for its own purposes. Hence, Tian Huang could access some of the magics of heaven without actually accessing heaven. While the spirits of the ancestors will always have a place with the land, people, and state, quote, the tradition of all dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living, end quote. In this case, it is their souls too. These tablets allow one to keep the soul indefinitely, completely purified of fey and shadow magic, just like the souls of heaven. I stress it once more. These souls provide magics for Sinai, allowing their priests to access divine magics directly from the state, without ever beseeching this from the gods or planes. Tian Huang was careful with this new technology, so he first bestowed it only upon a select group of nobles. He had waited until the Sinai state had amassed enough power this way to be able to withstand the retaliation that he would face. When he had done so, armies of angels, Empyreans, and Nephilim awaited him at the northern border, upset he had absconded the gods and spat in the face of religion so blatantly. In the east, there were elven armies, who said to him that he abused his position, leveraged a mid-tier bequeathment to become a world player. A minor border kingdom was now a threat to the galactic establishment. Tian Huang fought a few skirmishes, but sent out envoys to discuss diplomacy at a place of his choosing. In a move seen as either cruel or ingenious, he had the three, the ancient elves, the gods, and the Sinese, meet at none other than Lie. While here, Tian Huang gave rousing speeches. The ancient elves and gods realized that any military move by any side would be an irreconcilable and unretractable move. The gods would see the elves as stealing this secret, and the elves would see the gods interfering with the doctrine of non-intervention that the gods tacitly, not explicitly, follow. It would be a conflict that would cause misery and animosity amongst all those involved, and the very thing they set out to stop from spreading, this solar technology, would become common knowledge amongst all. The ancient elves had no use for this power, as they had no care to collect the souls of their forefathers, and made contingency plans for their own. They, who made all manner of doomsday devices, feared the spread of this power to the non-elven forces of their domains. Meanwhile, the gods found it utterly blasphemous, and Sinai sought to jealously guard it. Indeed, this is why they were the only state to continuously survive from the Second Age until now. So the gods, the ancient elves, and Sinai all worked to destroy any attempt to unlock this technology, though today it be just the gods and Sinai. It is said that Golgotha makes a nominal attempt to discover this technology. They will make no progress by the end of the Fifth Age. They will be thwarted by the Jade Emperor whenever they see so much as a spark. Those of Sinai are to pay a solar tribute to the phylactery of life. From now on, the souls would walk the 100th Porcelain Road, protected by the Sinai state itself, and then Dantanos would guide those who crossed to their tablet. Tian Huang made off quite well, and the gods did not see a world where mere kings took away what was rightfully theirs. How did the ancient elves make out about this? Where was the new elvish superweapon? Well, in return for sealing off this avenue, the elven representatives demanded that the gods relax their religious policies, giving way to modern religious rites and a focus on pantheons. Furthermore, the 99 released the people of Sinai of any religious bounds or ties. This was a bit of an empty gesture, however. The lunar elves of this land, by and large, had never chosen a new faith to tie themselves to after the wanderer abandoned them. Finally, the gods taught the ancient elves literary. Tian Huang made these tablets common to his subjects. A magistrate was to create one for each infant, around the time a mortal receives a soul, complete with the description and their legal names. Shrines, made for the purpose of storing these tablets, were created. It was a great honor to be allowed to found one's own shrine. The shrines themselves had different networks and hierarchies, different nuclei to unite the shrines of various families, and then finally found themselves under the arm of the state. Essentially, legalism was combined with an extreme form of ancestor worship, whereby people could become priests of their own family. Now, as to what extent the family or the state were responsible for the protection of these shrines, and what rights they had vis-a-vis these shrines, varies with the political situation. Regardless, in Sinai, the spirits of the ancestors are almost perfectly preserved through the souls of these tablets. No wonder they produce such archaeologists. Sinai does not have to go far to find and talk to those who were alive during the Second Age. And for the souls, they are worshipped, they are given gifts, they are given entertainment. And when a mortal is not around to ask for their advice and opinion on things, they have each other to talk to. It's a nice, simple life befitting an elder. Still, they are harvested for their magics. They stop producing more soul stuff. They slowly fade away and are used up. Tian Huang retired after 18,000 years of rule. Some say this Nephilim had become the spirit of the Sinai state. Some zealots go so far as to say he became one with the spirit world. Tian Huang appointed a Nephilim who had 11 heads, whose eyes were fire, and who had claws instead of hands, to succeed him. This Nephilim, in deference to his liege, called himself the Earthly Sovereign. His reign started in 1434, fifth giant of the Second Dusk, when he was 11,000 years of age, and his rule lasted for 7,000 years. There's another important event that occurred during Tian Huang's reign, though it was not under his reign. We believe there was a human city called Zindike that lasted for 250 years in the fifth alien of the Second Dusk. This city had come to a sudden end after a strange being had taken over its facilities, infusing itself in the tribal magic and holy temples, and slaughtered all the living beings. Rumor has it that this was the failed elven experiment Proto-B, one of the causes of the so-called Silver Age collapse, a cancerous fey entity that continually grows. Footnote on Silver Age collapse. We will discuss this in Revelation. End footnote. We should search for this city, my Empress, and we will not have to worry about food for our galactic empire ever again. In the year 784, fifth god of the Second Dusk, the earthly sovereign had appointed the Atlantean Shenog, who was ox-headed, sharp-horned, bronze-foreheaded, and iron-skulled, to the throne. However, almost immediately, Shenog took the title Yon'di, married a blood elf, and declared that one of his children would inherit his throne and also take the title Yon'di. This dynasty, the Flame Dynasty, lasted for 45,000 years, and again, each of them took this title.
though it may also refer to just him.
The Yandi introduced many innovations to Sinai. The most notable of these innovations was the use of the Triceratops.
In fact, the Sinese were possibly the first culture to truly domesticate the Triceratops, and they are used as pack animals.
It was during this reign that the events of the Ramayana happened. Lord Rama, so named after Kunirama, who was the seventh Dashavatara of Vishnu, who was the prince of Ayawaja in the blood elf kingdom of Kosala, had done battle with a Rakshasa named Ravana, who was the king of Lanka, who ruled in the face of the ancient elves, and who was loyal to Lord Shiva. Their epic duel was in the year 3505, fifth alien of the second dusk. The ancient elves from across the galaxy stood amazed at the breadth and beauty of this affair. From all over, poets would sing of the events and drama of these two powerful figures. The most famous rendition was done by the poet Valmiki. Atheists have written entire treatises detailing how they believed these two figures had been wasted on what they considered a petty conflict. Officially, we should not endorse such views, for it would be bad for our propaganda and Bharat, and the Vedic gods are the only gods we are still somehow on good terms with. However, privately, we should all agree with this. This was a time when the elves were not only aware of outer space, but they were the masters of the known universe. Planetary concerns, lunar battles, stellar trade were all on their minds, a situation never seen before or after. Footnote. Until us, of course. End footnote. And yet, what did the gods do with these great mythic heroes, each tragic and noble in their own right? The gods had restricted these mythic figures to unimportant lands, doomed to fight over some familial dispute rather than some greater political cause. The gods wasted their potential, as they always do, though we, of course, would never say that. All hail the gods! Back to Sinai. Shennong's policy of hereditary monarchy was beginning to have unintentional consequences. Many great nobles were Elven, and others Nephilim, and political marriages were made with both for an extended period of time. The repeated mixing of blood elves and Nephilim across generations results in the powerful Rakshasa, whose power and might is only matched by their trickery and deviousness. It is not that they are evil, it is that they are individualistic and follow their passions and whims. They are almost completely unpredictable. Even close friends will be surprised by their actions. In fact, the only time one may trust a Rakshasa is when one has beaten them at a game of chance, for, by and large, they honor their gambling debts, though not necessarily other kinds of debts. The point is, eventually, the Yandi became a fickle dynasty, and the nobility, especially royalty, are not particularly known for their chastity. Many times, bastards are given control over various peoples and regions. Then, because of the hereditary principles espoused by Shennong, their children found themselves as the head of these tribes. The most infamous of these were the Nine Li, which was headed by Chi Yo, whose grandfather was a bastard of one of the Yandi's lesser daughters. Chi Yo's head was bronze, and it looked like that of a bull, though bulls did not yet exist, and his hindquarters were like that of a bear. He had 4 eyes, 6 arms, and 81 brothers. Chi Yo and the Nine Li rebelled against their sovereign, the Yandi. He ravaged the land, becoming an unstoppable force. Though he raped and pillaged like any other army, he was not an altogether bad tyrant. For instance, he introduced many of the mortals of Sinai, far removed from the bright lights of the ancient elves, to the proper rituals and sacrifice one needs to control weather. The Yandi tried many times to confront mighty Chi Yo, but he fell before this rebellious son with each battle. Reader's note: at this point in his presentation, Tom K. flashed the Sinese characters, Huang Di, in the sense of yellow sovereign, into the minds of his audience. There was another tribal leader, whose tribe was one of those blood elven peoples unintegrated into ancient elven society. His name was Huang Di, which means yellow sovereign. Footnote:
Yellow is a stately and august color in Sinai's philosophies. In fact, Huang also means august, and the words are homonyms, though they use different characters. Hence, we shall see this title again. End footnote. Huang Di saw the writing on the walls and knew it was time to overthrow the Yuan Di. Huang Di met the Yuan Di at the Battle of Ban Chuen and overthrew his liege. The Yuan Di capitulated and granted him all the honors one needs to spiritually rule Sinai. Footnote: but as we have just seen, this is not the only factor when it comes to practical rule in Sinai. End footnote. The Yuan Di begged Huang Di, on his knees, to join their forces and beat back Qi You. This was the first time an elf, a blood elf, would rule Sinai. Shortly after, Huang Di and Qi You faced each other at the Battle of Zhuolu, the 10th encounter Qi You would have with the Yuan Di and Huang Di. Qi You had seemed to be taking the day, having surprised both armies while they camped, which of course means soldiers with empty bellies. Thousands of Nephilim, elves, Rakshasas, and human mercenaries perished that day. It is said that the spirits of the dead can still be heard wailing amongst the exquisite vineyards that now grow in this place. The battle seems to have impacted the spirit world everywhere, for the contemporary historians noted that 100 hobgoblins from 100 ancient elven courts were allowed to return home that day. On the third day, Huang Di commanded the spirits to make the town foggy, so that he may have time to contemplate. Using his mastery of the Arcanum, he created the mighty Thunder Chariot. This device is a floating platform, movable by the thought of the pilot alone. Clawed spikes jut out of the platform, allowing this vehicle to impale those that come in its way, and magical cannons blast arcane radiation from its sides. The Thunder Chariot was unencumbered by terrain, able to rise to any altitude, and required no animal or energy to operate. This was the ultimate superweapon in Sinai. It was quickly realized that no matter how many casualties the Huang Di faced, he would be able to blast away scores of enemy soldiers. Most of the 9 Li fled, and Qi You was ordered beheaded. The gods looked at this in horror. It seemed that their creations were now powerful enough that one madman could destroy everything. In the Third Age, when the gods reasserted control, they banned this device and destroyed all references. Later, it was you, my empress, who revived this, who spit in the face of your gods. Though, during your reign, its use shall be restricted to you, standing as a symbol of imperial might. But in the Fifth Age, our soothsayers say that the Terran Empire will proliferate the technology and make it common amongst their military leaders. So, in 1784, fifth slave of the Second Dusk, Huang Di had gained control of Sinai. The fertile land of Zhuolu became his capital. An exorcist removed many enemy spirits that were resistant to him. This was the first time a blood elf would rule Sinai, setting a trend that would last for over an age. However, practicality meant that the Huang Di's reign only reached so far. He named this core Huasha. Qi You, like all Rakshasa, could simply return to the materium after crossing the porcelain roads. For the Rakshasa has a soul, but a modification was granted to them by Virgo. After they cross through the porcelain roads, their soul grows a body, and they may return to the materium. Hence, none recognize them as one of the 7 mortal races, despite having souls. But this significantly weakens the Rakshasa. Qi You returned to the materium, but he never stirred up trouble again. He was worshipped by the founder of the Qin dynasty, and later, the founder of the Han dynasty built him a glorious temple as thanks for assistance in the battle against Shangyu. He still resides in this temple, and he was involved in the ethnogenesis of the Hmong. As you can see, there is some level of debate as to what to make of him. Though we may be belaboring the point, it bears repeating that though these elves of Sinai are of course ancient, they are not the, quote, ancient elves. Ancient elf is a specific socio-cultural term, It refers to a second age subgroup of the Blood Elves. It does not refer to all the Blood Elves. Those of Sinai, Atlantis, and Mora are traditionally excluded, though there were others, especially those outside the ley. Footnote on ley, which was, after all, created by Maui at this time. End footnote. The ancient elves were never politically unified and exhibited all manner of cultural differences with each other, but we call them the same word because they all followed the same trends. In time, each polity did foreign relations the same. Each lorded over the other races. Each was impacted by grandiose technology and interstellar travel, and each went the way of extreme decadence. Many use the term ancient elf to describe the rulers of the galactic empires of this time, and though we may use it from time to time, we cannot forget that they themselves were divided into the rulers and the ruled. In the year 2784, fifth slave of the second dusk, Huang Di saw a phoenix die. It bursted into flames, and then a chick flew out of its dust. Few witnessed such a beautiful event, and it put Huang Di in a highly contemplative mood. He decided it was time to end his reign. He appointed his grandson Zhuan Shu as his successor and asked Xiao Hao, his son and Zhuan Shu's father, to act as regent for a time. Huang Di bade his farewells and walked into the spirit world and merged his soul with Huasha. Zhuan Shu instituted many reforms and policies that would be better explained in a tablet devoted to Sinai, but suffice to say, he greatly shaped Sinai's religious policy. However, he managed to only really impact the world of Huasha, and even then, it was confined to his capital. He was instructed to rule for 780 years. In the 780th year of Zhuan Shu's rule, in the year 3564, the spirit of the Huang Di appeared before Zhuan Shu's court. He instructed Zhuan Shu to give up his reign and devote himself to the study of alchemy. He was to give the throne to Xiao Hao's grandson Di Ku, who was his cousin. Di Ku was regarded as worthy, as he had stirred up no rebellion when he and his father were denied their birthright in favor of Zhuan Shu. It is said that Di Ku would ride a dragon in the spring and summer, and a horse in the winter and fall. Ji, son of Di Ku, then took over the throne. In order to gain the throne, Ji had violated the laws of Zhuan Shu, who personally came out of retirement to condemn him. And yes, at that time, elven kings would live after abdication. 9 years into his reign, in the year 4216, Yao, son of Di Ku, usurped his throne and became the sovereign. It was his reign that would see the end of the Yuga.